This week on To the Contrary.
First, do guns make women safer? Then, GOP House members who are pro-life in public but pro-choice in private. Behind the headlines, imagining a world where men and women are equal.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, women and guns.
The deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history has forced a mourning nation to once again debate gun control. The country is more divided than ever. Polls show Republicans and Democrats are more split on gun control than just about any other issue. The NRA has made a targeted pitch to women for decades, claiming guns help women protect themselves from predators. But a new study shows women are 100 times more likely to be killed by a man with a gun than to use the gun in self-defense. According to the FBI, 16 justifiable homicides in 2015 involved a woman defending herself against a man. By contrast, more than 1,600 women were killed by a man with a firearm. More than 90% of these murders were committed by someone the victim knew, and in most cases, the murderer was a husband or partner.
So, Delegate Norton, does owning a gun make a woman safer?
No, Bonnie. A woman in the company of a predator needs to get out, not engage in a shootout.
I think it makes a woman feel empowered, especially if she knows how to use it in the right situations to use it in.
Well, the statistics show that she's not safer. However, I do think that women feel safer, even though that's really not true.
I think women do have a right to defend themselves, but I think we're to the point now where we have to say, does a woman or a man have the right to have 42 weapons and high-powered weapons that will slaughter policemen as well as innocents? So I think there has to be some line drawing.
Well, specifically, but the women's opinions on this issue are women aren't as pro-gun as men are, generally speaking.
They're not, but I think you're starting to see women, particularly women of color, black women, are starting to join gun clubs, sign up for lessons to learn how to shoot a gun and to buy guns, in part because they want to feel safe from perpetrators who tend to be, people that they know, and also, unfortunately, because of some of the civil unrest around race that's kind of come up over the past year or so. So I think you're starting to see women who move towards it.
Well, Bonnie, first of all, let's understand the context here. Neither women nor men find themselves safer against somebody coming at them with a gun if they have a gun. The statistics are overwhelming. Now, to say that to somebody who wants to protect themselves may lead them to ask, well, what should we do? And that's what I think we should be engaged in. Not really saying to black women, white men, or anybody else, because the statistics show the same thing. If you just have yourself a gun in a shootout, particularly since men are far more practiced, those who carry guns, with guns, than those who don't carry guns, to leave them with a false assurance that they can somehow win their safety by just arming themselves.
I'm confused because, I've been followed down the street when I was a kid. I've been, in situations where I was a little nervous, although I grew up in Manhattan, and I was taught to walk like you're doing business, and I did, and, that scared people off, I guess. I don't know. But how do you pull a weapon out of your purse and aim it at somebody and be ready to kill them, by the way, because most likely they'll lunge at you and grab it from you and use it against you?
I think people who would make the argument are assuming a high degree of proficiency, almost instantaneous reaction time, and that's probably not relevant in most cases. I think women should be empowered. I think first of all, we should have better public safety in our cities and rural areas. I think women should absolutely have self-defense and to learn to walk and have a presence that would deter perhaps nuisance people.
What about learning jujitsu?
Right. Right. Self-defense is always a good mechanism. But I think if you're really going to put the onus on the woman to fish out of her purse a gun, turn around, pivot, aim and fire at a car following her down the street is probably not what we really want to have on our inner cities. First of all, the guy may be looking for directions, and people may overinterpret other individuals with a gun, take matters into their own hands when it's really not warranted.
Well, I want to bring up the statistics that the FBI just put out that we discussed, that only 16 of these were self-defense. Women need to be very careful because as a former prosecutor and a judge and being in the justice system for many years of my life, women don't tend to get off when they shoot men. Very few, you're told, oh, you're right, you were justified in shooting that man at self-defense. You end up going to prison. So that's another whole discussion that needs to be talked about when we're encouraging women to have guns. The other thing is, if you look at the stats, it's somebody that you know. It's domestic violence. It really isn't pulling it out of your purse. Really, most of them you're going to be in a home type situation, in a car, in some close encounter with somebody that knows you, knows who you are, and knows how to get to you.
All right. Do you think what happened in Las Vegas persuaded women, particularly, and men who are against gun control, that maybe it's time we enacted something? I know the end result is probably going to be nothing, except perhaps the end of the mechanism that turns a semi-automatic into an automatic weapon. But what do we think is going to come out of this, and how, if at all, will it change public opinion?
Well, public opinion, if you look, actually is in favor of some of these restrictions. So the question is whether it changes the politics of it, and I fear it doesn't. I think this has become one of these very polarized issues that goes beyond the immediate issue of guns, that invokes culture, that invokes a lifestyle, that invokes all sorts of other images. And I don't see that changing any time. I think
something is coming out of this, if I may say so. Because, first of all, we have to understand this is unique. What we've been talking about here, predatory gun use and the rest, is totally irrelevant here. This man probably had no background of guns, was an upstanding citizen, was indeed a rich man. But what we're seeing in the House is that the Republicans are beginning to join with us, at least on the notion that this contraption that enables you to take a gun and make it into essentially a machine gun, that those ought to be barred and outlawed. So I think, for one,
you think that is going to pass? Because
the
NRA obviously came out and said, well, we'll consider this, and then Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, walked it back the next day and said, well, we're not talking about a ban. So do you really think they're going to let the House members?
Well, shame on us if we don't. It seems to me the fact that first they were silent, then they looked like they were going to go for it, and now they're saying we're going to go for maybe some version of it, releases some of these Republicans to come forward and said, at least we're not going to have this kind of a mass.
But how many mass shootings is it going to stop if you pass that?
No, this was a unique mass shooting. This man had taken a contraption and had made it into a machine gun. So we begin to get
right,
this
but
bill
that wasn't
passed.
the case.
Wait a minute. We begin to get this bill passed by focusing on this matter. If you want any process and any procedure on, you don't go for the gun show loophole here. Mm-hmm. You focus in on what happened here, and then you dare Republicans to say, we don't think anything should be done about that in the future.
So what I think is interesting is that going back to 2010, under the Obama administration, the ATF had decided that these gun stocks could actually be sold, these mechanisms to kind of turn them into machine guns could actually be sold. So it would be a great opportunity for the House and Republicans and Democrats to come together to try to enforce kind of federal law around that prohibits semi-automatic weapons, and I think this is a good effort. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a mass shooting, and we're talking about somebody who, as you rightly said, Delegate Norton, flew under every other radar. So we're talking about how do we legislate away an issue that deals with the heart, and that's not something that Congress can do. That's not something that we can write a law that will deal with. We're talking about somebody who is an evil person, and no law is really going to change that.
Okay, I'm not so interested, although I would like to think that we can come up with a combination of laws that would end mass shootings. I'm much more concerned with I think it's about 580,000 deaths from gun violence since 9/11. And I think there has to be some agreement on. They may start off small. I think Delegate Norton is right. You got to start small and you got to bring people along. But why do we have bullets that can pierce the body armor of a police officer? Is that really necessary? Can we have some limit on the number of guns or the frequency with which people can collect guns? Some states have tried measures of a gun a month or a gun a year. The NRA opposes even that. So I think we can look at some reasonable restrictions. There's no other amendment that is absolute, and the Second Amendment isn't either. They have the right and the power to regulate in reasonable ways. You can't own a cannon or a nuclear bomb, and some of these weapons and some of the ammunition, I think, needs to be reviewed.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay, @To the Contrary. From gun control to abortion rights.
Anti-abortion Republican Congressman Tim Murphy of Pennsylvania will retire following reports of an extramarital affair during which he urged his mistress to get an abortion during a pregnancy scare. The 64-year-old congressman, the only psychologist in Congress, admitted to the affair with 32-year-old forensic psychologist Shannon Edwards. This week, he voted with the majority in the U.S. House to ban abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. This is not the first time an anti-abortion rights male member of the GOP has been caught acting hypocritically on this issue. In 2013, Tennessee Republican representative and medical doctor Scott Desjardins was confronted with divorce records showing he'd encouraged women to have abortions, including his ex-wife and a patient with whom he was having an affair. He is still in Congress and voted for the same bill this week. In the 1990s, former Representative Bob Barr of Georgia was outed by his ex-wife. She said he helped her to get an abortion while they were married.
So help me with the thinking that goes behind this kind of behavior.
Do as I say, not as I do. I mean, that's basically what it is. The hypocrisy is horrific. And we're seeing a lot of hypocrisy these days in politics. There always has been, but I think the level to which we are seeing it and what we're tolerating has to be stopped.
So what's the answer?
Well, I think that Congressman Murphy's doing the right thing to leave. I never thought he'd be able to stay till November. And I think people that do this need to resign their office. But I think we also need to look at something when we're talking about abortion. Look at the ages of these women and the wives. We always want to talk about abortion, about teenage girls. Well, they don't have a voice and they can't vote. But the average abortion takes place between 26-year-old and 35 to 37-year-olds. These are women who are married or in relationships, they have jobs, and men keep attacking women and saying, you don't know what you're doing, and yet these same men are going, but when it's my situation and I don't want to own up to having another child, it's just fine.
You know, Bonnie, though, I was on the floor just this week because the 20-week abortion ban was on the floor.
Right, of course.
Some of us went on the floor to talk about women who had had abortions. I had a woman in my district who was pregnant with a fetus that had lost half of its brain, wasn't there, and she had an abortion she could not have if this bill had prevailed. These Republicans who, by the way, voted for this 20-week abortion ban are in much worse shape than Democrats because they have been vociferously against such legislation, whereas if a Democrat, I would have been equally, I must say, in this case, I would have been equally critical of a Democrat. But at least they hadn't been at the front of the line saying no abortions under any circumstances. So the hypocrisy of the entire Republican Party is shown up, and this was a terrible week for this to come out for them.
Well, and the two who are still in Congress voted for that ban.
For the 20-week abortion.
Right, exactly.
I think it's unfair to paint every single Republican negatively with this. I mean, this guy made some really bad decisions, and I think
64 years old with a 32-year-old mistress.
And then another part of the story is how he treated his staff. He had a 100% turnover rate because of he was abusive, maybe hopefully not physically, but verbally abusive. So this is a guy who I think has made a lot of terrible mistakes. I don't think it's right, though, to paint every single Republican, unfortunately, especially those who support abortion.
Well, we're not painting but it just so happens that on this issue, the three most recent have been Republicans.
It is a major tenet of the Republicans in the House of Representatives.
I want to go back to the issue about the hypocrisy. I think one of the reasons why we think, and I think it's accurate, see so much of it, it's gotten so bad, is because of the intense partisanship. It doesn't matter if my guy does it, he's my guy. He's on our team, we're going to defend him. So when a candidate for Congress punches a newspaper man, does the Speaker of the House say, no, you can't run, or no, we're not going to seat you? No, he's one of theirs. He's another seat. So I think a lot of these behavioral issues go back to, are we going to maintain some kind of universal standards of behavior and morality, or is it just who wins, who loses, my guy is up, your guy is down?
But should there be some penalty? For example, you were saying, it's wrong. What should be the penalty? Not, being unseated, not being allowed to vote on anything having to do with
I'm not sure that the Speaker
rights.
of the House, Delegate Holmes Norton, would know better than I do. But I'm not sure that Paul Ryan could have said to Congressman Murphy, you can't do a vote on the floor, because it came out that you would have if you could have, right?
I'm talking Fantasyland.
Yeah, Fantasyland is great. I'd like to go there. Sometimes I feel like we live in it these days.
But also the end of this week, the president rolled back the requirement in the in Obamacare that companies pay for birth control or allow women to get policies that cover contraception. I mean, is this the end? Is this what Republicans really want? They want women not only to not have access to abortion, but not have access to contraception.
I don't think we should go that far. I mean, pre-Obamacare, women still could get what they needed from their health insurance companies and plans. And so I don't think it's fair to say, well, because of Obamacare, if it's rolled off, then women will no longer be able to get access to contraceptions. I don't think that's fair assessment.
Okay, well,
and I don't necessarily
poor
think
women.
that.
Then. I mean, really, you're right. It's upper class women will have no problems, but poor women.
Well, I think there are programs that poor women can get access to the care that they need, especially at kind of the smaller hospitals, smaller the word is escaping me right now, but I think it's still possible to be able to provide that for poor women without creating a mandate for every single person to have that.
Okay, but this just drives me nuts. It just drives me crazy that we are sitting here talking about, well, you can go out of your way and maybe go 7 miles and try and get this and get that to protect yourself from an unwanted pregnancy. If you get an unwanted pregnancy, there's no way that we want you to be able to terminate that unwanted pregnancy. Why are we allowing people to talk to women this way and use words like moral, or if I'm your employer and I don't think it's moral for you to have birth control, that I'm allowed to do that and have that effect upon your reproductive organs. That's just nuts that we're allowing this type of language to be used against women in this country.
I think this goes to another issue that has concerned me for a while, and that is the notion that either an employer or people providing a service can refuse service, can deny a special benefit simply because of their own personal views. If you're in business, if you're operating in the United States, you should be playing foursquare, treating everyone the same. So I think the whole notion that you can operate a business and get special dispensation because you personally wouldn't want to use contraception, or you personally wouldn't want to have an abortion, is really suspect. And if you look at statistics across the board, people are not pleased with this kind of behavior. The polls overwhelmingly show that refusal to serve is very unpopular across the board. There's a fundamental issue of fairness that, yes, we respect people's religious views. No one's going to force you yourself to use a contraception, but to deny it to an employee.
But that's not what the president did. To go to your question about rolling back contraception, which is very much related to what we've been discussing about abortion, Republicans would be much more credible on abortion if they didn't go at contraception at the same time.
When in Congress, do you feel like they want women to be barefoot and pregnant again? Is that where they want to take women?
There are very few members of Congress, Republican or Democrat, who have more than 1 or 2 kids. So the hypocrisy is on everybody's face if they want to come out and say you shouldn't use contraception. Remember what Republicans are supposed to stand for. Democrats too, I hope. And that is the right to privacy, the libertarian right not to have anybody invade your most personal decisions. Let's just stand on that. We can all work together.
What's going to happen as a result of the rollback? Are we going to see more unwanted pregnancies? Are we going to see an increase in abortion, which is exactly what the pro-life right doesn't want to see?
I mean, I don't think we're going to stop seeing women being able to get contraception. They're still going to be able to do that. Will you see it among poor communities? I think that's something we'd have to watch. But I think there's a lot of overkill, and this idea that Republicans just want women to go back to the 1950s or 1940s is wrong. I think you made the statement quite well that it should be really about your individual choice, and the government shouldn't be providing it, nor should taxpayers be funding what is your individual decision and choice.
Yeah, but can't you say that? So I oppose the military, for example. My tax dollars, I don't want to see them going to support the military because I believe there's a lot of wasteful spending there, etc. If everybody in America had their personal item taken out of their taxes, we wouldn't have a government, which is probably what one gets the sense that may be what's going on here, but.
But to Delegate Holmes Norton's point, Republicans who are a little smarter have figured this out. Cory Gardner, who ran successfully for the Senate in Colorado, was attacked using the war on women sort of political messaging, and he said, you know what? I'm for contraceptive access. I want to make it available over the counter, and he went full in. And I think you're right. They would have much more credibility on this issue if there was an understanding that there's a difference, obviously, between contraceptive access and abortions.
And we can use statistics to answer your question, Bonnie, that you just asked about, is this going to cause an increase in abortions? And the answer is yes. Will it disproportionately affect people of lower income? The answer is yes. The statistics are out there. We have had a decrease in abortions over the years as we have had more access to contraceptives, prevention contraceptives. So that's
are we
going to
see a response? Are we going to see a response?
Answered.
We saw the Women's March on Washington the day after President Trump's inauguration. Are we going to see a response to this? Are poor women of color who rely most heavily on on their health insurance plans for contraceptives more so than middle or upper class women, are they going to do anything public about it?
I'm going to try to fix this in the appropriation bill. I really think that this is so
Do you think you'll
off the wall.
succeed?
Yeah, again, if you go to the Senate the way I do, it's a little more sanity than in the House. Sometimes you can keep some of these things from happening. He's done something unilateral, but there's still got to be money. And I think the appropriate.
Well, you could say that President Obama unilaterally put it into the ACA.
Oh, no.
No?
Oh, no. That's not how I got in the ACA. The ACA went through the full hearing process and was enacted by the Congress of the United States. He's trying to snatch back things.
Yeah, but they did a workaround when contraceptives were going to be, when there was the controversy over the Hobby Lobby case. They did a workaround. which came out of the White House and out of HHS, that didn't go through Congress, I believe.
Well, it's interesting. At the time, the Republicans complained that the president is doing all these unilateral actions. You can't change Obamacare to guide through certain problems. You have to go through Congress. And now what's the President of the United States done? He's done something on unilateral action. So are we going to go through Congress or are we not going to go through Congress? That may be a good thing depending upon your position or a bad thing. But the Republicans until January 20th of this year were all about reducing the power of the executive and empowering Congress, the people's house. I'd like to see a little bit more of that and a little less unilateralism from an administration that the vast majority of Americans have many issues with.
To your question, Bonnie, I'm not sure that low-income women, necessarily as a group will rise up and march and protest, but I think women as a whole should, and we should be looking out for all elements of the economic scale of women. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of marching. You don't have the luxury of taking time off work. But we definitely are under assault as women, and I am literally horrified that 100 years after Margaret Sanger and birth control, we're here.
All right, sorry we ran out of time. Because of the news, we will bring you the story about a gender equal world at a later date. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.